welcome to Fearless Founders. Ike and I have a great show on today, and he is such a kind man and so experienced. He's so unique, so uniquely positioned. Dave, we're so glad to have you here. And Dave Chidester has a background that is very unique in that he has not only grown multiple tech companies, but he's had the role of being the chief financial officer, the finance guru, the adult supervisor, he may say later on as we go through.
Thanks for having me today, guys.
People listening in are going to say, oh, okay, I'm hearing what a CFO can do to help me, but when? Is there a dollar number? Is there a number of employees? What's a good guidance, Dave, to
Well,
give to people listening?
first, I would say is, bootstrap your company as long as you can. I'm not advocating like bring in a CFO and go raise a bunch of money. I don't think that's what you should do. Um, I think there's no perfect rule for when, but I think it is if you're getting to the point where you're worried about cash burn and like how much runway you have, and you need someone to really help you understand what are my expenses, what is going into this, where is my money going, and how do I extend my runway. So on the one hand, can I never raise money? Do I need some help to make sure I can get there? Or if I know that I am going to have to raise money, getting a good, strong financial model, projections, understanding of my costs and margins, being able to talk to all my metrics, all my key metrics, right, that they're going to ask about. Making sure I have all that dialed and understood. Again, the CEO, it's nice when they don't have to come up with all that, but they can they can learn it, they can understand it through a really good financial model. So anytime you really need to understand, and again, you can have somebody come in once it's all set up. It's 2 or 3 hours a month to update it. It's not a huge investment to honestly have somebody. A lot of times they'll bring in a bookkeeper or an accountant. It's nice to just have someone that can kind of manage them. Sometimes they don't know how good they are. They don't know if they're doing things right. Just have an experienced person to come in and just look over their shoulder, say, yeah, this looks good. Everything's okay. To me, it's just the peace of mind that it brings to a founder to just be like, okay, I'm not just guessing. I'm not just assuming. I actually have someone in there that understands this, that can tell me, I can have confidence that this is my results. This is how I'm doing. This is my runway based on, how I'm currently doing. So just bringing in some discipline behind, I think without being able to do some kind of projection to your business, it's really hard to understand your runway.
Yeah.
And so I just think that anytime you feel like you're ready to really bring that kind of discipline, again, if you're just trying to get your business up and running, you're just trying to get some sales, some customers, you're just trying to figure things out, it's probably too early. You don't need anything then.
In a nutshell, I've often told my legal counsel as well as my CFO, I'm here to build a business. Help me get there. I don't care about the rest of the stuff. You
Right.
take care of that. Please help me grow the business. Right? Ike's
Yeah,
looking at
yeah,
this, right?
yes, yeah,
In the dialogue of growing the business, I don't want to know about gap. I don't want to know about all of these other things. Just protect us and grow it. In fact, you haven't even finished your story. You then went on to Mediconnect Global, helped grow that from X size to what size? You sold it,
So
right?
it was, yeah, when I got there, we were in the mid 20s, fast growing company. Same thing. I was the first CFO. They'd ever really had a real CFO. They were in a really good position. They were growing really fast. They had very profitable business. I went from Overstock, which was a retailer that, if you could grind out 5% at the bottom, you were lucky, to this business was a 40 to 50% EBITDA margin business, software. I was like, wow, I like this. I like this. I like B2B software. This is way better than grinding out a few pennies. I mean, at $1 billion, it was making about the same amount of money as MetaConnect was at $50 million of revenue.
uh-huh.
So it was that much more profitable. But yeah, by the time within 2 years, we had grown it. When we sold it, the year we sold it, it did 90 million in revenue and about 40 million of EBITDA. So it was an amazingly profitable business. Again, we had gone, our goal was to we were looking at doing an industry roll up with a bunch of our competitors, and a strategic buyer came in, and luckily we were able to close that deal. And so they were a large public company that bought us for just under 400 million. So that was another great experience that I had with just, going through transactions. I'd done an IPO. We had bought and sold some businesses at Overstock, but this was the first really big private transaction, and just amazing experience.
In my history that I'm going to draw it from there, I remember, in the previous business, we were bootstrapped for 7 years. And then the VC came, said, Ike, you need a CFO. And we had no audit financials or nothing like that, right? So VCs need that
Yeah.
for sure. So I said, okay, I've been given my next task of finding a CFO, and I called Binoy. Binoy, what questions do I even ask to a candidate? Right? So, Binoy, do you remember that you sent me a Word file? So, that's one. Like, can you go into like what should a founder should look in a right CFO for her or him, and then I got to do it right after the Series A. So there's that dynamic, like when to do it based on the investment, and final one. I'm just gonna pile up for you so that you can
Okay.
synthesize all of it. You said you started at Overstock as a controller and then grew. So is that the part of the equation for a founder? To find somebody that they can get along and grew together.
Yeah. Well, let me just start with talking about hiring a CFO and just hiring, like, who you hire in a startup in general, because I think that's a really important thing for startups. Um, One of the things I've really learned, because again, I'm telling you about my past. I'm working with 4 startups right now, so I'm in the middle of startup world right now. This is not like something I did a long time ago. I'm in the middle of this. Some of them we've raised money, some we haven't yet. So
Mhm.
I'm dealing with this stuff right now. And one thing that I've really, come to reminded about is startups are not normal companies. And so when you go to hire people for startups, and this is the same with a CFO, they just have to have a different mindset. They can't worry about titles. They can't be worried about what they might be doing on a day-to-day basis. They can't be worried about their compensation. They have to be more concerned about the experience that I'm going to get. I know I'm going to wear a lot of hats. I know things are going to change all the time, which is probably the hardest thing for people to deal with. Is startups change. I learn a process and then we change it, and some people just don't deal well with that. And
Yeah.
so, and then, ultimately, my goal is the reward can be much bigger if we pull it off and we execute right. But I have to understand that the day-to-day grind is going to be hard. It's going to be lots of change. It's going to be unpredictable. And so a lot of people just don't function well in that environment. And so you have to be careful when you hire. And it doesn't matter what position in a startup, whether you're an SDR or you're the CTO, which is usually a co-founder, but somebody in maybe a software engineer, they've got to have that mindset. They got to be curious, like learning, like change. You got to figure that stuff out up front, or there's no point in hiring them, because they will go away. So what's unique about me, I think, is I'm at a stage in my life where I should be at a big company managing lots of people with a big salary, and what am I doing doing startups still? Like why? So I feel like I have a lot of value because I'm willing to do that at this, and I do have some experience now of having done this a few times. So I think that you have to look for somebody who's willing to do that. Now, often they're a little younger, and that's okay. If you have someone who's been a controller like I was at, I started as a controller at Overstock. My first CFO job was in a public company. That was a little crazy. I don't recommend that. but
Yeah.
but you could, promoting a controller that's proven themselves to your CFO, that's fine. And I've done one of the things I do now is mentor those first time CFOs. where I have clients that just call me and ask questions as a first time CFO. And I think that's another great use of like an Amplio or fractional CFO group is you can just use them as a mentor. They
Yeah.
call a couple hours a month. Just call it. If I would have had somebody to call back in those days, I was like on my own. Like I was just figuring it out. I was like, wow, if I knew anyone I could call to ask some questions about this, that would have been really nice. So, so I think that's the mentality that you want is someone who's just there's no ego, right? You just have to let ego go when you're in a startup, and you have to love building, and you have to be curious, and that has to be the driver. And so you got to find a CFO that's like that. You don't want an accountant. You don't want someone who just does books. Like that's like you're just trying to manage cash flow. That's what all you're doing at this point. Like we don't need really good accountants. You need somebody who understands business models and managing cash flow.
Our audience has already started on their way.
Yeah.
What's two things you would say, and give us an illustration that would make their lives so much more improved with your CFO specific background, having been an operator, an investor, a mentor? You're uniquely gifted to give that advice.
Yeah. I think the one thing I've really learned is most of the time when founders goes to start a business, they've found a problem that exists in the world, right? And they're out to solve it. And a lot of them have um, personal reasons why it matters to them, right? That they fix this problem. So number one is hopefully that's the kind of founder that you are, because that is what drives you to find the solution, right? So there has to be so much like resiliency, right? But the thing that I've realized is it's very infrequent that the customer that you think is going to buy that is going to pay for that solution you've developed. It's very rarely the one you thought it was. And but by building that, and that's why it's so key to last as long as you can, right? Because sometimes it takes a little while to find the true customer for your business. I'm dealing with multiple businesses. Here's one example. Um, a business we invested in a few years ago. It's a business called Honk, and they came up with an app for managing tow trucks. And if you're a consumer, a lot of times if you're out in the middle of nowhere and you go get a tow truck, they just completely gouge you. So it basically created a marketplace where you could go multiple tow trucks would be bidding. It would bring the price down. And so they kind of created this whole network for managing tow trucks. Well, on a consumer level, that thing was just kind of floundering, right? And at some point along the way, they realized that all the big insurance companies, car insurance companies, that all manage tow trucks for their customers, because usually you get one or two tows free as part of your car insurance. And it turns out that their infrastructure was so outdated. I mean, decades old. And so they've slowly been replacing large insurance companies back end. They've gone completely away from consumer. It's a complete B2B product now. And these customers, they're doing over $100 million of revenue now. And again, that's not what they built it for.
Yeah.
But the key is don't go in with this idea that you're just sure this is my customer and I'm going to force this to happen. Build something that's a great solution, and then let the market pull you to who wants it, and let yourself go there, right? And that's the key. And I made that mistake as a investor looking at companies early, is I focused too much on their original idea and not enough on the founder being able to find the right idea. And so I turned companies down because they had a terrible idea. But if I would have really thought about the founder, I would have realized they're going to figure out a market for their product. They're going to change. They're going to pivot. They're going to find a way.
I've gone through a lot of examples, good and bad. Any insights on of what not to do or what to do that
Well,
invest
yeah,
these CEOs? Yeah.
I think again, when you're starting out, you as tempting as it is to take money, if you should talk to other people that they've invested in. If they're not willing to let you talk to other founders, that's a really big red flag, right? So I want to talk
Why?
to,
Why is that?
well, why wouldn't they want you to talk to their founders, right? Most likely that means they've probably had a bad experience, because most board members when you're early are VCs, right? They're the people who've put the money in, then they get a board seat. And I recommend you keep boards small. Like, you don't need a large board as a small company. You don't need a whole bunch of, talking heads. You need, founder really is the one that knows what's going on. They're the ones in there day in, day out. What you're really looking for in investors are people who can help you get customers, help make introductions for people that work there, helping to introduce you to other investors. That's been invaluable. Who's the next round of investors? If I've raised a seed round, who are the A round people? That's what your board should be doing. And then they're there when you have questions and want to talk to them. But they should be very, you want to find people that are very, very founder friendly. Like, I'm on a board right now. The board, there's two VCs and the founder, and I'm an observer. Founder has 3 votes. The VCs have 1 each. Founder can outvote them on everything,
Yeah.
right? Of course, he's never going to do things where he doesn't have the support of his board, but he knows that the board can never come in and just run him out, right? Because they don't know. They're not there day to day. Now, when you have fraud and you have these kind of things, it's a little different. But again, you don't know that CEO had any knowledge of that. So anyway, my point is, really early stage, you don't want investors that want to get involved. They don't know. They're there for money, support, helping you bring in relationships, helping you bring in customers. They're not trying to tell you how to run your business. Most of them have never run a business themselves, right?
Yeah. That's a
So
scary truth.
yeah, so again, very much there to support, make introductions. If you have questions, God, I'm struggling with marketing. Oh, we got a portfolio company, amazing head of marketing. Let's have you make a call, talk to him. He'd be glad
Yeah.
to have a conversation. That's the kind of VC that you want. They're partners. They invest. You want investors who invest in the founders.
A question. It's
Yeah.
a loaded, fun question.
Okay.
Uh, is it easier? Is it more fun to start something from scratch, or to go with a going concern that's small enough that you can jump on and become one of the originals, right? That already has momentum. There's a difference between 2 million and 10 million versus 0 million.
Yeah. Yeah.
What, what, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I don't think it's a bad idea if you want to be a founder to first join a startup and kind of learn how a startup works, not being the founder, and actually, spend some time working in a startup. I mean, when I'm in startups, our whole goal is that people that we bring in, leave the startup and start their own companies. You're going to start a company much better if you've already been in and learned some of those lessons, like in a startup. It's hard to tell somebody that if you haven't experienced it. When you've experienced it, like, I don't know, we just don't learn lessons very well unless we learn them ourselves. Kind of like our kids, right? We can tell them and tell them and tell them until they actually go through it themselves. They just don't listen. So I do think there's some benefit to that, getting into something that's not brand new, but fairly new and has revenue, but maybe it's still trying to find true product market fit, and jump in and kind of get part of a team and kind of learn the ropes a little bit before you go in and just do it yourself. It is hard, and I would say there's also a difference between starting a company that is is a competitor to something that already exists versus starting a brand new idea, right? That's very disruptive. Overstock was not a novel idea. It wasn't the first to do it, but by coming in as third, we could kind of learn from the other two, and we didn't have to figure everything out ourselves. And then you just have to differentiate, right? That your whole goal is, how are we different? The market's massive, 3 players. We can get a piece of that and still be really big. Versus when you start a brand new thing, there's often a lot of times of educating the customer, convincing them that it's okay, getting them to trust before they'll buy and use it. And there's always a longer, it's usually a longer process to getting product market fit when when you're really disrupting or coming up with something new. So you just have to know that. But the opportunity is much bigger in those situations where if it really works, you could potentially own the market or be a big piece of the market. But the education process is long and painful usually.
Yes.
Mhm.
By nature, we don't like to change. People don't, companies don't, especially when you get into enterprise, right?
Yeah.
The sales cycles are longer. And so anyway, I don't think it's a bad idea if you want to start a company to first jump in and work at an early stage company and learn a few of those things first. Because again, they'll have a much bigger impression on you than if you just listen to this podcast and I tell you these things.
Yeah.
You jump in and do it, then you'd be like, oh yeah, he was right. This is
Yeah.
hard. This is really painful. Do I really want to do this? And either I'm going to be like, I love this. I love this feeling. This is amazing. It's crazy up and down, but this is exciting. Versus, or you might be like, yeah, I don't want to do this. I'm just going to work for someone else. I'm not going to waste 3 years of my life finding that out. I just found it out.
Mhm.
So anyway,
Thank you. You are a star. We have not had someone with that great background and a perspective. It's very unique, Dave, and we are very grateful that you came.